When you're trying to decide on a new router, the biggest worry is whether you're paying for hype instead of real, day-to-day value. I've spent the last few weeks setting up a few different high-end units, swapping cables, and watching how they handle everything from 4K Netflix streams to marathon gaming sessions. The goal of this review is to help you figure out if the Asus ROG Rapture BE98 actually lives up to its ultimate gaming promise, or if it's just another pricey box you could live without. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the problem most of us face, a router that can't keep up with the number of devices in a modern household. My own setup includes a gaming PC, a PlayStation, a couple of laptops, a smart TV, and a handful of IoT gadgets. The moment one of those devices starts buffering or dropping packets, you can hear the collective sigh of frustration. That's why the BE98's focus on dual WAN, 8 Ethernet ports, and mesh integration caught my eye. It's marketed as the router you need if you're serious about low latency and seamless coverage, but the real test is whether those features translate into a smoother experience without turning the configuration process into a tech support nightmare. I started by connecting the BE98 to a fiber line that offers 1 gigabit per second down and 300 megabits per second up. The dual WAN ports let you plug a secondary connection my backup 4G dongle right into the back, which is something you rarely see outside of business-grade gear. In practice, the failover switched over almost instantly when I manually disabled the primary line. No dropped games, no sudden network error messages in the middle of a raid. For anyone who can't afford a lost match or a missed video call, that kind of reliability is a concrete benefit, not just a marketing line. The 8 Ethernet ports are another practical win. Most consumer routers give you 4 or 5, which forces you to rely on a switch if you have more wired devices. I plugged my PC, console, NAS, and a streaming box directly into the router, leaving the remaining ports for a future smart speaker and a work laptop. The wired connection stayed rock solid, with latency hovering around 3 milliseconds on my gaming rig, something that even the best Wi-Fi can't quite match. If you already own a Switch, you might wonder whether the extra ports are worth the extra cost, but for a growing house where you're adding devices every few months, it saves you from buying another piece of hardware. Mesh coverage is where the BE98 tries to set itself apart from the competition. Asus ships the router with a single unit, but the ROG line supports additional mesh nodes that you can add later. I placed a second node in the far end of a 2-story home and enabled the mesh mode through the Asus Router app. The handoff between the main unit and the node was seamless. My phone kept a steady signal while I walked upstairs, and the game client never reported a ping spike when I switched rooms. That said, you do have to buy the extra node separately, which adds to the total expense. If you live in a small apartment, the mesh capability might feel like overkill, while larger homes will appreciate the flexibility. Now, let's talk about the RO-specific optimizations. The router includes a gaming mode profile that prioritizes traffic from devices recognized as ROG or manually tagged. I tagged my PlayStation and PC, then launched a fast-paced shooter while a family member streamed a 4K movie on the smart TV. The game's ping stayed consistently low, and the video didn't stutter, suggesting the QoS algorithm is doing its job. However, the benefit only shows up if you actually use the Asus ROG ecosystem, meaning you have a compatible motherboard, graphics card, or peripherals that can be identified by the app. If you're a casual gamer with a standard setup, the advantage may be marginal. The biggest practical downside I observed is the learning curve. The Asus Router app is packed with options. You can tweak bandwidth allocation per device, set up custom DNS filters, and even schedule Wi-Fi shutdowns for certain hours. While power users will love that depth, a typical consumer may spend more time scrolling through menus than actually playing games. The initial setup took me about 20 minutes, largely because I wanted to enable dual WAN failover and mesh. Once configured, the router runs quietly in the background, but getting there isn't a one-click experience. Another point worth noting is price. The BE98 sits well above the $200 mark, which is a considerable jump from mainstream routers that still deliver respectable speeds for most households. The 4.2-star rating from over 200 buyers suggests that the majority are happy, but the handful of lower scores often mention the price-to-feature ratio and the complexity of the interface. If you're on a strict budget, you might find a mid-range Wi-Fi 6 router that handles everyday browsing and streaming just fine, without the gaming-centric bells and whistles. So, who should consider buying this router? If you're a competitive gamer who